Hello, my name is Ilana Weiss, and I would like to share with you my perspective on my life. My life may already be known to you due to a case study done by esteemed psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, a bearded nurse specialist who came to see me when I was 24 years old. The events which led to my meeting Freud can be found in his case study, yet I do not believe that he was able to tell them accurately, but we'll get to that later. I could tell from the moment that Freud met me that he was impressed by my intelligence. My diagnosis at that time was that of hysteria, and I dare say that he came into my case with somewhat lower expectations of my state of mind. Because of this somewhat unfortunate passing of judgment, the tense state of our relationship was determined quite early on. I told Freud about the pains in my leg and the way that I tired easily. Freud made me walk, kneaded my legs, and told me that I would need to receive electric shock treatments for my legs. I think Freud was just as bewildered as I was about my case, yet, being a somewhat egotistical individual, proceeded to confirm my diagnosis without hesitation. I was somewhat displeased when my inquiry about whether or not I should be forced to walk was met with an undisputable yes. About 4 weeks later, my treatment changed. My sessions with Freud now consisted of him attempting to pry sensitive details from my life from me while I lay down on a stiff cot with my eyes shut. I suppose that now it would be expected of me to relate those details to you. However, I will only do so in the hope that I can remove some of the patriarchal bias with which Freud related my story. I was born the third child of a wealthy Hungarian family. My mother was a fretful woman whom I often worried about. My father was her opposite. He was lively, intelligent, and my best friend growing up. Though I may have been an intellectual like my father, I was merely a girl whose intellectual ambitions could never be realized. My father treated me like a son, yet when I expressed my aspirations, I was told I was too confident for a woman. My life took a downward turn when my father was brought home unconscious. We later learned that he was suffering from pulmonary edema. I made his well-being my responsibility, staying by his side through countless nights and trying to remain optimistic in spite of my father's hopelessness. I was crushed when he died. A year passed in grieving, and then my eldest sister married. Her husband was a controlling imbecile whom I did my best to deter from becoming a part of my family. I succeeded only in that he moved to Austria with my sister, further isolating the rest of us. My other sister was not as foolish and married a sensible man who remained close to my mother and me. Sadly, my sister had a history of heart problems, and during her second pregnancy she passed away as well. My condition had worsened as well. Not only was I burdened by fatigue and pain in my legs, but the devastating results of my second sister's marriage had further convinced me that being married almost inevitably resulted in suffering. And there you have it, more or less a summation of my life up to my current state. Unfortunately, Freud chose to take the details of my suffering and work them in a way that only a patriarchal psychoanalyst could. Freud somehow concocted the notion that I was in love with my brother-in-law, and that the guilt that I felt for loving him was manifested in my leg pains. An absolutely absurd idea. The last thing that I wanted was marriage. I certainly wasn't willing to leave my mother to fend for herself, and I hadn't exactly warmed up to the concept of marriage at that point. Freud tried hypnosis, shock treatment, and attempted to lull me into a dreamlike state, yet I am not convinced that any of his plans worked to any significant extent. If you would like to know why I believe my leg was in pain, then I would gladly tell you. The area on my thigh where I feel pain is the exact same area where my father used to rest his leg while I bandaged him. I told Freud as much, yet he seemed rather unsatisfied by this explanation. My relationship with my father was special to me, and his death still pains me, both physically and emotionally. Freud imposed this notion that I loved my brother-in-law on me, and for that I decided to leave his service, though he believed my treatment was incomplete. And I believe my life took a turn for the better because of this. My attitude towards marriage eventually changed and I became engaged. I married a man who shares a mutual respect for me and listens far better than any psychoanalyst I've ever met. We have a happy marriage and a wonderful daughter. So there you have it. That is my life from my own perspective, without the commentary of a pompous young man who thinks he knows the workings of a female mind. I encourage you to challenge the patriarchal rhetoric that this society follows, and hopefully enlighten others to the power and individuality of women.